Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the BFG Podcast. Today I'm here with Sam and Jill from It's in the Ballot, which is a platform on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok, and they have their own website where they interview candidates for various electoral elections. So welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
So why don't you start by telling me how you created this platform that you now do?
Okay, so it dated back to pre-COVID, after doing the 2019 local body elections. I stood for Poneke Wellington constituency for the Greater Wellington Regional Council, and I was one of 25 candidates turning up. And one of the things that particular election was, Greater Wellington Regional Council was put in the spotlight that election because they screwed up the bus network. And as a result, there was a lot of people wanting to sack the council for various different, reasons, all that sort of stuff. But the interesting part was to be informed on local bodies. There were tools out there, but there were a lot of people who didn't necessarily know how to access the tools. A lot that happened in the last week was a lot of people go, I don't know who to vote for. Who do you recommend me to vote for? Which is a very poor way of asking as a candidate who to vote for. And because, I could tell you how I voted in my own ward, but these people who are asking me were also living in different wards in Wellington. So that itself complicated things as well. Because, and the interesting part I also found it was a number of people in Tawa who didn't actually realise for the regional council they were part of Porirua, not part of Wellington, because they considered themselves more as Wellington constituency because they paid their rates to Wellington City Council, not to Porirua. And I mean, that was something that was, a long-standing thing that dated back to the 89 reforms. So it was something that my campaign manager Mel and I talked about. Was I wanted to look at doing something different for the 2020 general election. We worked on what could have been a show format. At the time, I was doing 0800 TARDIS Live, which was my Doctor Who gig. And basically, it was about the Doctor Who shows. We sat there and took a look. Can we take the show travelling around the country? And it was following Selwyn Toogood's old format of the TV show It's in the Bag. And, I said I wanted something similar to that format because it was just it was one of those things that you just wanted to have. It was something different. I didn't want it to be, flying everyone into Wellington or into Auckland into a studio. It didn't quite have the same charm as having it from the local community. So I sat there and suggested that. My campaign manager, Mel, said I should call it It's in the Ballot if we're going to follow It's in the Bag. It went for that COVID hit. It threw everything a bit out of whack with what was happening. And then it wasn't until after COVID, it was June. And I was caught between, an opportunity of it was reopen the coffee car or do I look at putting this project on a very localised scale? In the 2020 general election, we planned, which was 9 electorates. We ended up only completing 8. But it's just one of those things of just what happens. We did the local, so we did the general election. We did, was it Rongotai, Wellington Central, Ahariu, Hutt South, Rimutaka, Mana, Otaki, and Palmerston North electorate, and Wairarapa was the show that was aborted. Not particularly impressed with how that happened, but that's just one of those things that happens. Then we worked on a format. Auntie Susie stuck her nose in, which was a good thing. It was bringing in, well, if you're going to call it It's in the Ballot and based it on going to the town hall, you might as well have the questions in the boxes. So that was where the question in the boxes concept came from. And it basically took on a similar format to the TV show It's in the Bag. But we took it to the next step. I've got to be honest, that 2020 version we were definitely not nowhere near to what we were in 2022. 2020, we were running things on web cameras. We weren't able to focus up on close-ups. So there was a lot of improvements that were done between 2020 and 2022. 2022, I went in again. We was in the 2020 team, myself, Stacey and Eddie, basically regrouped together. We expanded our team a bit and brought the 2022 It's in the Ballot shows. It was looking at production. It was 38 shows, and it got down to 34 by the time the enrolments came through.
Yeah.
And we did all the council awards in Greater Wellington. I do know that we had, I think it was, we cancelled one show because Wairarapa constituency had Adrian Staples was elected unopposed. And our Otaki show, no candidates responded to us, but we weren't sure if they weren't going to turn up, because that's one of the things we learned from the show was at the later point of the show, quite often you have candidates wouldn't even bother responding or saying anything, but they would turn up on the night. Well, if they turn up on the night, you've got to sit there and welcome them with open arms. So it's been it was an interesting aspect. We then tried the Hamilton West by-election as a test ground to see if you can take the concept outside of Wellington. And that actually proved to be successful in the aspect that the MP who won, ironically Tama Portaka, regretted missing It's in the Ballot back in 2022 and was immediately like, yes, for 2023. So it definitely got through there. And the other thing was, like, how do people who don't have the means or the opportunity to get to a meet candidates meeting actually find out who's standing? Because that's the big thing we're in a representative democracy, and with representative democracy, you have a local MP, and your local MP, should be based on voted in by the community, not necessarily on what their party leader is like on a leaders' debate. And you meet different people. You find out more of the personal aspects of these candidates rather than just relying on what's the rhetoric from the media. And we had a very different approach to our shows. We got, and in turn, it possibly gave the smaller parties more opportunity to have their say. And it got people to actually realise, oh, that's actually a good candidate for such and such party, or that's not a good candidate for such and such party. The other thing we also worked out was, depending on the area, sometimes the big parties just thought they were too good to turn up. And, that might come back. I've heard that has come back to bite for some MPs. And it's just one of those things of what happens out there. And, the aim of the show is we stream it live on Facebook, live on YouTube, live on Twitch. The live streaming platform part, that came into a later part of production in 2020. We were looking at, and like the reason why we actually ended up on Twitch was some really weird, it was a weird situation of, we were looking at platforms and we didn't know who to stand for where. So we just basically looked at, if we stream from our computer to the server, then the server can send it to multiple destinations without overloading the processor on the computer. And that was how we've got this multi-platform approach. Came simply from it was effectively we can stream to more than one destination. Why not sit there and do it? So yeah.
Carry on. I'll let you finish, then I'll ask the next question.
Sorry?
Carry on if you like.
I'd probably say I've probably need more questions to keep going. I've gone on for a few good minutes now.
So the next. So how did you? So I found, as you know, I found you in 2022, and I would jump into the chat on and off and all that, and then in recent times we've started, setting this up. So, was that your goal, to make it accessible to like people like me who could only go out certain hours, so that at night they could sit down and watch it? Was that like a goal for you?
That was a spin-off effect of it. My campaign manager, Mel, had a stroke, and she had quite limited movement. One of the frustrating things that we actually found out as well from the Meet the Candidates was she didn't have a disabled car park permit. She never got one. So we had to go to the venues very early to get a car park that wasn't disabled next to the disabled car park. And it was mentioned about it was disabilities, but it was also one of the things that was focused of. It was people who also worked as well. So it was those who, like yourself, who couldn't have got, couldn't necessarily get out of the house. But it was also for those who worked who may not be able to get to a nighttime Meet Candidates. Like I know in my when I stood in 2019, I had a part-time job at Domino's. I had to apply for multiple nights off just in order to sit there and to do Meet Candidates. Now, if you put that down to a candidate's level, not a candidate, if you were a staff member, you probably wouldn't be able to go, I need the night off work to find out who's standing for council. You probably wouldn't have the opportunity to do it. You'd be seen as, how can I see that outside of my work hours? So it was more of how do we sit down there, give it where you can watch it when you feel like it, sort of thing. You can watch it after work, or you watch it, at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, depending what sort of shifts you did. And it was just, so it was to help people get informed who was standing where and what they stood for. And it was just basically, it was about putting information out there for everyone. My grandma, she's 95 now. She used It's in the Ballot to form her basis for voting, because she herself didn't go to any Meet Candidates meetings because she's legally blind. She would have to get a taxi to do it. She's one, so she herself effectively used the platform to figure out who to vote for. And I always liked how Grandma's rules was, if you're over 65, you're automatically ruled out. I thought that was quite funny. And maybe that's a sign of her being a former secondary school teacher that's still, of progression of rank, moving up the chain.
It was interesting because how I found you was for privacy reasons. Won't say the name, but I found you through one of the candidates. I got recommended through one of the candidates. Jill, how did you get into the
team, the crew, as I call them. Sure. Well, look, I'll just mention that I met Sam back in 2015 when we were doing, sorry, I've just printed something out. I hope it's not being too loud and noisy. When I was helping the late Penny Bright help us fight the No to Super City battle in Wellington. He was doing the video, so that's when we first connected. So clearly we had each other's contacts on phones. I think the next probably was when Penny died, and I wanted someone to go up and video the funeral. So Sam did that. I did come across, Sam did ring me for the 2020 elections and obviously the Wairarapa, but at that point in time I did not have the time to organise anything over here. Having said that, in 2022, I got another phone call and I said that I would be prepared to organise one, It's in the Ballot, with Sam as a pilot project before most of the other 34 election nights, It's in the Ballot shows went ahead in the Wellington region. And so we had quite a successful show, wasn't it, Sam? We were lucky enough to have Ron Mark, who obviously adds a bit of fun to the whole thing. And so that was fantastic. So for me, that was really the first time that I really felt that I understood the show and what it stood for. The reason that I'm just printing this out was that I kind of look at it in 4 ways, which I'll mention in a second. So then this year, Sam rang me at the end of June. I had just finished up a job So I had time on my hands. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. So he was asking me where would be a good time to do a Wairarapa ballot show. And I said, yep, hey, I'd be happy to help out there. So that's how it all went. And within about 2 or 3 weeks, I found myself pretty much working full time on this project. So asking your questions about what some of the benefits are, I kind of looked at them as being having basically 4 themes in terms of being online and available. The first is obviously technology, and that is the good use of technology to get the message. And the message, as Sam has said, is to inform voters. That's clearly what we're here to do. Secondly, that whole idea of accessibility, which you discussed, obviously with voters who have disabilities, voters who are possibly overseas, voters who live in rural areas like the Wairarapa. Masterton people probably wouldn't be driving all the way down to Martinborough to watch meet the candidates, but if they can see it online. Thirdly, the intergenerational appeal. And so again, Sam touched on that with older people, younger people. Younger people don't tend to go to it. It's meet the candidates. I know I have 2 sons in their 20s and they wouldn't be seen alive at a meet the candidates meeting. And fourthly, it's an increased awareness of both national and local issues. So the idea at the end of the day is most meet the candidates are very localised. This way, we can actually watch it's in the ballot in Auckland, and we can get some ideas of how Auckland are faring in elections. So I believe myself that's an extremely worthwhile cause. I think that we are right at the beginning of our success. And I think potentially this leads into, yes, we are doing the by-election up in Port Waikato.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's going to be quite interesting because I've got to sit around and school myself up on local knowledge and pukekohe.
So we'll talk about the actual election more later, but because it's relevant, let's just address the elephant in the room. So, how do you guys feel about Labour deciding not to run a candidate? Because that's a huge deal.
I feel that it is a disservice to those Labour-leaning voters, and it's not just Labour who has done it. ACT have also done it, so has the Greens. It does put things into an interesting mix because it effectively is telling the public, telling the Port Waikato Labour voters or left-leaning voters, you haven't got a candidate to put your vote in. Because if we sit and look at the candidates that are available in Port Waikato, they would a Labour-leaning voter probably typically wouldn't vote for them. Now, it is going to be an interesting election now, the fact that Labour hasn't stood someone, and it's going to be Andrew Bailey from National, probably with Casey Costello from New Zealand First. So it's going to be an interesting election. It has changed the dynamics to how it was previously. Now, I'm not sure if it's an indirect sign of what was said when the Northland by-election happened with Willow, where effectively a lot of Labour voters voted Winston Peters to knock National out of the mix. But that could be a target, but I don't think that is the direct approach. But indirectly, Labour voters may actually be effectively have been forced into that position, whereas previously, I do know from the Northland by-election, they actually had a candidate. But the interesting part is this is the first time we've actually had a deaf causing a by-election in over 70 years. The last time it happened was 1957, and this was before TV existed in New Zealand.
And before I was born.
Yeah, well, actually, before, and both my parents. I mean, like my grandma, Dad's mother, would have been 2 kids and would have just gone back to teaching, and my mother's mother, probably in 57, would have just had her. Would have been on her 3rd child. Would Richard have been born? yeah, she would have just had 4 children. So my mum hadn't even been on the cards at that point, because, just trying to think 1957, And that would have been a radio point in time, not a television point in time.
Yeah. So do you think then, now that we've gone through death, do you think the current legislation is accurate? Do you reckon there need to be any updates, or do you like this process that they're going through at the moment?
The by-election part, it's a tricky one, because we in New Zealand, it is a hangover from British law, and it dates back a couple of 100 years, because it was a piece of law that was adopted from the UK, that if there is a death, suddenly the election is suspended for 6, and then happens 6 weeks later. That is what the law states. Now, the other one is we could have the option of what happens in the United States, where a dead person's name can be on the ballot, and then, the dead person can't take the seat, so then a by-election has to happen, or as they call it in the United States, a special election. Yeah. It's a mixed bag of what do you do in that situation. I'm not sure if it's the weird quirk it has done is it's clearly when they brought an MMP, they never took into account because on election night you have to have 120 seats. Now that is something which I did not know existed until the by-election was announced, that we're going to have a seat overhang as a result of it. But I mean, what do you do if someone does die? It's a weird one of I'm not sure how you could tidy up the legislation. It's a very weird point in it, because some people might say, well, it was a minor party candidate who died, so maybe the election should have gone ahead. But what happens if it was, say, a major party? I mean, we do have other situations, like how Ididaka Ratana came to Parliament was the fact her husband died in a car crash 6 weeks before the election. Yeah. Or it might not have been 6 weeks, it might have been a bit before, because she was nominated. She was the one who succeeded in her nomination to succeed her dead husband at the 1949 general election. So I don't know. It's a weird one. What do you do there? That's an example of what happens when it happened a bit before the election. But I don't know what would have happened in a by-election in that situation.
Yeah.
Would she have been able to stand? I don't know. It's a weird one.
And it's good that we're having conversations like this for people. Now, not everyone's going to be interested in these subjects, but it's good for people like us who are interested in that sort of stuff, that we can have these conversations, because it's not until it actually happens that you realise, oh, hang on, how can we improve? Now, for me, I would like it to be whoever is the current government gets an extra list seat. I would like it. I would like that. So effectively, whoever's on your list for that area would automatically get the seat from the current government, whether that be Labour or National, or depending on how the years go by, whoever the major parties are. Because that's starting to, some of the minor parties are starting to grow now. So in 30, 40 years' time, we may not, Labour and National may not be the only ones in the picture, which will be quite interesting.
It could be very interesting times if that does happen. I do believe this election is the starting of proper MMP style parliament, that what Germany has. I believe this is the starting point of it.
Now, I've had a lot of controversial opinions on this, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Do you think the two current major parties are slowly dying?
Yes.
Do you think we'll see Green, ACT, New Zealand First, etc. have their day in the sunshine going forward?
Yes, Acton Greens, I do think will continue on. I'm not sure about New Zealand First, and the reason why I say that is the fact that Winston Peters has been the leader of the party since 1993. And I'd like to know what is New Zealand's first succession plan, because Winston will not be there forever. That is, that is reality. But how long could he be there? The interesting part is he's 78 now. This might be his final term. It might not be. I certainly don't want to see him do a Dianne Feinstein, which was the United States Senator who was
Correct.
over 90 years old,
Yeah.
who died in office. I don't want to see him end up in that boat. But I do think Greens to Party Māori, I believe on the cards. I do believe other parties will come in. The interesting thing about where our thresholds sit is what kind of starves out smaller parties, because we adopted near virtually 100% of Germany's rules. We've adopted this very high 5% threshold. Now, in Germany, they have 660 MPs in the Bundestag. To coattail in Germany, you need 3 MPs to coattail. In New Zealand, you need 1. But the reason for the 5% threshold being so high was fear of the Nazi Party being re-elected.
Right.
And that was part of the reason why they brought in MMP. It was to stop the worst extremes coming in. I do believe National and Labour because of our voting system, their two-party dominance has taken a bit of a tumble, and this election actually did show it. There was the fact that both ACT and the Greens gained seats that typically, one was a safe National seat, 2 were safe Labour seats.
Yeah.
So I do think that has changed things, and I do think there is a lot of people who are out there, they don't want National or Labour, they want something different altogether.
I agree with, yeah. I agree. Just to comment on your answer, I agree. I reckon the Greens will be the next. I agree with that article that came out the other day. I reckon that the Greens will be the next superstars.
I certainly believe there's a possibility. I would have said the same about ACT, but I'm not sure. They could be demolished after this election as a result, potentially, but potentially not. Because the last time they literally got whittled down to 1 MP was 2011, and it was after Rodney Hyde was rolled. Now, I don't think David Seymour is going to get rolled, but you never know what could happen in the next 3 years. But that is the thing. There is ACT will have to adapt. But the one thing is, I think ACT will now mature with the fact that they're likely to have ministers and they're likely to be in government and possibly have, I think, 2 members in cabinet. Potentially could be more. So I do believe they will become a little bit more moderated now than what they previously have been.
Have you got anything to add, Jill, to any of that?
Yeah, I think you can be going for quite a few minutes.
No, I'm thoroughly enjoying listening to you both. Well, obviously, I've seen many elections, more than you guys, obviously. I've also lived in the UK for 15 years under a fixed past the post system. Obviously, MMP is a great system for encouraging a more diverse contest of ideas. So I think when I heard you both speaking, was that, we've got to remember that we are in a democracy, and you talked about the potential issues with New Zealand First and a leader. My feeling is that Winston is an extremely canny politician. I think he will become a Sir at some point in his life, whether that's when he gives up the party. But I certainly feel that Winston Peters, who's probably is going to be looked at when he leaves or when he dies as to one of New Zealand's most influential politicians, personally. And I think for that reason, I believe that Winston Peters will, in actual fact, look and make sure that he has a successor planned. He's got some exceptional candidates that are in his current list. Sam and I came across some very good ones on our trip up to Auckland, covering 21 electorates was what we eventually covered. I counted them all yesterday. We had a few abortions, as in people didn't turn up and we couldn't really run them with only two candidates. So watch the space. I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm looking forward to the 3rd of November when we get the specials counted. It'll be really interesting to see whether those so-called, is it 500,000 specials are going to go, I don't know, more left or more right. I just anecdotally, I've got a step-grandson. He's never voted in his life. He's never been on an electoral roll in his life. And I suggested that maybe he would consider that. He took my advice, quite surprisingly, and texted me and said, "We've done specials, Jill." He's 28 years old, him and his partner, and we voted for Winnie. So interesting, and I do not obviously discourage or try and push people towards one particular party. So that is going to be very interesting, so considering, of course, that New Zealand First was the oldies party when they first started. So I guess that's my advice. But I think the issue is we've just got to remember that we're in a democracy, and anything is allowed in democracy, providing that it's within the law. And that's what we must always remember.
And I apologise that I'm jumping around a bit here, but with the growth of the parliament, how do you hope that will allow you to attract better, higher quality candidates in the years to come for your in the ballot platform?
Can I answer this, maybe, Sam? Yeah, because I've kind of taken on the role as candidate liaison, so it's kind of my responsibility, I kind of feel, to encourage people to join. So obviously it is a situation whereby we send out an invite and someone obviously has to become a candidate. So our client base is candidates only, so I guess we don't have any ability to particularly choose candidates. But I believe that we saw during our 4 weeks, which was effectively what it was, from the 14th of September to the 13th of October, when we covered 21 electorates online, in studio, and I think it was 5 electorate shows remotely. So of course we can do remote shows as well. We saw some excellent candidates who were in these minor parties, and when their results came out, they were very minimal, obviously, because they're standing against a whole lot of different people. So, you've got a lot of, I think, exceptionally good candidates coming through, and maybe it would be good if some of the major parties looked at the quality of some of those candidates. I would certainly myself be encouraging those candidates. I've had a history in local government for 21 years. I was a district councillor in Carterton. So, of course, my real knowledge and experience comes from local body elections and the candidates. So, my feeling would be that I would be encouraging a lot of those candidates who we have now formed a personal relationship with to actually go for local government elections. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and do you see yourself attracting the bigger names as well in the years to come?
You mean national and Labour candidates?
No, so maybe, I don't know, who can I use an example? This is too big, but I'll just use it as an example. Maybe like a David Seymour or Brooke Van Belden or...
Yeah, well, I agree with you. Yeah. So look, I have worked in the corporate world. I worked 18 years in London in corporate IT. So I was dealing with, the top 500 FTSE companies. We were traveling around Europe, completely different conditions to what it's in the Ballot roadshow. So I was doing roadshows both in the UK and Europe. So we were dealing with top people. My game is that in 3 years' time, we will be attracting all of those people to It's in the Ballot, whether or not they come in studio or whether we suggest to them that they do actually come remote. And there is no reason, if we obviously give our dates well ahead of any election, that, they have maybe, 3, 4, 5 months notice. and they see that it's in the ballot is worthwhile putting in, and at least they can come in wherever they are in the country or wherever they are on their campaign trail, and that they will in actual fact be able to participate.
And also, would you like it to get to a point where it can be you're earning an income of some description where you can turn it into a full-on TV thing?
Sure. Well, look, I've had a thought of this, and if you don't mind, I might step in here. Sam might like to order. Shall I do my bit first, Sam?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So look, my feeling at the end of the day is that all of us are volunteers. We have a team of volunteers, and it'll be my job over the next 2 years to expand that team if we are going to cover the local body elections, and certainly in 3 years' time, if we say for instance we aim for every electorate in the North Island as an example. We will need a lot more volunteer. We will need volunteers. So effectively, there's no way that one person can do this thing on their own at all. So what we may have, I suspect that we will always be more volunteer. And at the end of the day, when you look at all of the party members and the election teams behind all these candidates, these people are all volunteers as well. But I was actually thinking that there would be maybe one way of possibly becoming an income generating for someone or a group, and that would be for some broadcasting rights, television being interested in supporting the show or whatever. So that's kind of my little thing on that. I suspect that we will keep it volunteer until someone really wants to take it up in a bigger way, I guess. Sam, your turn now to sort of say what you think.
It would depend. Like, I wouldn't mind if it did get put onto national broadcast. I would be fussy which TV network it went on there, that sort of thing there, and also what is the production, what type of production controls would be in there, in that sort of thing there. Probably the closest to the production model I would like to be in, if that did head down the path, is how Larry King operated his shows when they were broadcasting on RT America. He did sit there and say he never had any of his shows edited. Like he said, there were minor edits that were put in for production quality, but there weren't wholesale bits chunked out from his shows. All his shows on RT America were pretty much like what he did to what went out was 99% the same. So it would depend on who would be in the network, but it's also where would that be provided? Because the thing is, the timing of when these shows broadcast are a very vital part, but also the networks that would gain the audience basis of it are also the networks that don't necessarily have, they probably wouldn't let the spots go. Like, I doubt that we would get it on TVNZ or on Discovery. I would probably say if it was ever on a provider, it might be Māori Television, might be the place where it would land. It might be a dedicated TV channel for the, that could be set up for the elections. That could just literally, have an election TV channel. If that was the case, that might be the best place for it to land. It could end up being put as a 24-hour, could be added into someone's 24-hour Twitch channel that, literally just, basically could be the New Zealand election debate channel for the upcoming election. So there's many opportunities on there, and we are open to options out there. It's just what can we do to get the best format out there with the right platform, with the right ethos as well, because we want to, support people who are, platforms that actually, support smaller players. We're not one who wants to go after big players, that sort of thing there. I mean, I'm a little bit fussy on who I'd be on an interview. Like, put it this way, I'm happy to jump with you because you and I are in the same boat. We're small fish on there. But if I got asked to sit there and do an interview with Mike Hosking, I would think long and hard about it, because I'm not sure whether that would actually help or expand the brand image or potentially could cause problems there. So it depends on, where it could end up. But I mean, you could end up in all sorts of various different places. I mean, you know, I mean, we've got 3 years till the next general election, unless the snap election's called early. Could be all sorts that could happen between now and then.
Look, I'll just put it on record here on the air. Now, I'm a big fan. I've told you this, Sam, but I'm a big fan of your content. I think you do a great job. You know, I will write in and tell you guys when the lighting is. You know, we can't see or whatever. Like we were saying on the phone the other day in the lead up here. But I'll make an offer to you here. I'm happy to do what I can to promote it. You know, I want to.
I mean, I would also be happy if you wanted to. We could broadcast the shows on through Restream and go straight to your YouTube channel as we do every other show live. I mean, that's an option that can be on the cards as well. You know, so you know, we did that for the Fabian Society, who lent us one of their cameras, so we did that in return. So you know, if you wanted to, but completely, you know, very happy for that.
I would be happy to keep this. I don't know how you feel, Jill, but I would be happy to keep this connection going. And you know, as my circumstances change, I might be able to, I don't know, help you. I don't know whether that be hosting or coming along or whatever. But I have a real passion for politics among disability advocacy, as I was saying to Sam at the lead up. So that's my little public, you know, plea to everyone.
Call out.
Get behind this. It's a great product. Sam and Jill and Stacey do a great job. Next to, and please support it. Please encourage the bigger name candidates to appear. I will be encouraging my local candidates to appear.
I'm very sure in Upper Hutt we will have no trouble for local bodies attracting candidates, because last local body elections, now I could guess who suggested to you, but I'm very certain I could probably say there would have been 15 people who stood for Upper Hutt City Council who would have recommended our platform to you. I can probably say it could be about 15 people. You know, that's probably going to tell you, you know, because that was how well supported it was. Upper Hutt really supported. I was very pleased with how welcoming the Upper Hutt community treated us last local bodies. I mean, and it's not just Upper Hutt, both Lower Hutt as well. It was like they felt like, you know, they were given. It was something that kind of like gave them a bit of buzz, because it felt like they said media-wise, they felt a little bit left out, and they felt like they were actually getting given the same shot that Wellington gave, that always got given at local bodies. So, yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to getting back to Upper Hutt, and it'll be interesting. We've got to look at what production models we'll do. I mean, I doubt there'll be change when it comes to its representation, because Upper Hutt does like councillors at large. So, it'll be an interesting way how we produce the next set of shows in the Hut. But I'm looking forward to it.
I'll be watching, I'll be supporting. What I will say is that person did reach out to me because they said that they thought we would get on really well and be able to build a connection and so on. Now, as we wrap up here, what are your thoughts on the coming 3 years? So we've got a now as it stands, because at the time that we're filming this, it's not finalized. But we 99.9% have our government. My only concerns around a national act government are the disability community. Because even though I have my support, my advocacy groups, we always found that under a national government we had to fight a lot harder, and that no disrespect to national, they just have different priorities. But it's going to be a very hard fight. If it what it was under the John Key administration, it's going to be a very difficult 3 years for our community, I think. And it'd be interesting to see whether Mr. Luxon, with all due respect, last a full term.
I mean, we wish him luck on that one. I do think the next 3 years is going to be interesting. I do think it's going to be a freeway arrangement between New Zealand First and National. Just the bits we know about specials, typically National tends to lose a seat on specials. The other interesting thing that's going to come out of it is the fact that there could be a couple of electorates that have swung to National at the moment might swing back to Labour on specials. That is potential. But also the other thing that the Labour Party, I'm not will be intrigued to find out how many electorates where there were Māori roll voters were pushed to do special votes. Now, hopefully for the Māori roll at their local polling booth, because it was too difficult to open up the Te Tai Tonga or the Ikaroa Rāwhiti book, depending where you are, and just look them up on there. And that potentially itself could actually change a seat or two. I'm saying there are two Māori seats to watch out for, both Te Tai Tokerau and Tamaki Makaurau. Those are seats to watch out for whether they do flip to Te Pāti Māori or not. If they did flip to Te Pāti Māori, if both of them flip, our parliament increases by 2 seats. That will change the makeup again. But I do believe I think safe to say, I think Winston, or New Zealand First, I should say, will be in there. And I hope that with him being in there, we can keep the local government review happening. That is a very big, vital one to keep happening, because that actually comes down to things like funding models and governance and voting systems, that sort of stuff. And also, I also am in the view of we need to split the regional council elections from the city or district council elections as well, and we need that review to go through. I do believe some politicians are going to be having a bit of a wake-up call, and we will see who matures as a result of becoming government. Will we see, because a lot of the people in National at the moment, the caucus, most of them have never been in cabinet. There's probably I'd probably say about 4 that I can think of that could end up in cabinet this time around who do have cabinet experience. I mean, Christopher Luxon himself hasn't been in cabinet. And running a country is a lot different to running, any company. I mean, any company, regardless of whether it's Air New Zealand or if it's an overseas company. So that will be the interesting thing, is how will that go? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I wish them well, and I hope over the next 3 years we will see what sort of product they can deliver. I mean, we've got to give them a chance. They've got 3 years to do it. And fingers crossed they don't abandon. The big one is they don't abandon the disability sector. That is something I really am certainly. I don't want to see that happen, because I mean, I don't know the full details behind your situation, but I can picture losing potentially 1 or 2 hours of help a day in the name of cost cutting can really affect your quality of life.
Correct.
That's something I don't, these things need to be balanced up, or, you have friends like my friend Tony Seymour, who, would have 90 minutes a day. This is when he was in Wellington to, do that. And he went out to a full-time work in a wheelchair. Those things need to be balanced up. What is the long-term goals? These are things that, we'll give them hope. We'll see what happens.
And of course,
I'm certain Winston will be there to be the guiding of experience that can steer things in the right direction.
And of course, I'll keep you guys posted if that's what you would like.
No problem.
On my work. So my final question is a bit of a hypothetical one, just a bit of fun to finish off our fun in the politics world anyway. So how close do you reckon, because the special vote percentage is so high this time, I believe a record if I understand, how likely are we to get to, we will still get a national government, but how close will we actually get to a tie? I think we might get as close as ever if the Maori one.
I could picture we could be a 124 seat parliament, but I don't see it getting to a tie unless it's a situation where National did extremely well on the specials or Act. But I don't see typically, and this is known by demographics as well, the specials tend to favour, the Greens are usually the biggest winners out of specials, and so is Te Pāti Māori. So I still think it will be there. I don't see a Labour, Green, Te Pāti Māori, New Zealand First coalition. I don't see that working unless it was a desperate measure to keep the country going. It could potentially happen, but I don't see it. I mean, even our own laws kind of push for, like, if you can't pass a budget, you kind of have to have you kind of are forced to have a general election. So that will be the big tipping point, is the first budget.
Because I can see, just by looking at the media, I can see there is a possibility slightly that Winton may change his mind.
I'm not sure, unless something drastic happens. That's the big thing. There would have to be something drastic in those votes, but I'm not sure if, like, that would sit there and say, if Labour ended up gaining an additional % in votes and National lost a %, that could make things very interesting. But I think that would be a Labour Party wish list hypothetical would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah. My final question for Jill would be, if something hypothetical happens, would you guys be, if it came to having to start the campaign again, would you commit to doing some more shows?
Okay, thank you for that question. Could I just quickly put my little oar in here? I believe that those 500,000 specials will actually go to a centrist right vote. So I believe that the current vote we have towards National, Act and possibly New Zealand First will actually be strengthened. That's what my guess is. I may be completely wrong, but I suspect that it will be. I'm now 65, so I've been around. Unfortunately, the last 6 years have been a difficult time for this country, certainly the hardest that I have remembered in the past. So I think people are wanting something completely different, and they're wanting a government that will get us out of the economic hole that we found ourselves in. So that's just me. You mentioned if something crazy should happen and those 500,000 votes are left-leaning and we have to have a re-campaign, I believe we would do this again, would we not, Sam?
I don't know how we've done it, but yeah, we will.
Well, yeah, that would be my role. As I would have to sort of say, well, look, we need some fundraising. So I have my ideas about that, and we'll certainly keep you in touch with that. Blake, the moment we're funding this out of our own pockets, effectively, we have asked for koha, but that's quite minimal. We were going to be doing a budget this week, but because we've got this by-election, I've said to Sam, hey, let's just put all our energy into doing a comms plan, etc. for the by-election, which isn't that far away. It's the 7th of November. We're doing our show on the 7th of November at 7 o'clock, so 7 p.m. for 7th of November.
And 3 days away.
And what?
16 days away.
Yeah, it's not long. It's not long or far away. So I particularly have quite a lot of work to do as candidate liaison. So I've said to him, look, let's just shelve the idea of budget. Let's just put all our energy into getting this by-election show underway. And I do believe I'm very pleased in lots of ways, as a slightly more centrist right-leaning voter, that in actual fact Labour and Green have let us have an election between a national candidate and our New Zealand First candidate and a bunch of minor parties. I think that if I was the Labour Party, I would have been putting some effort into at least putting the Labour candidate who was going to be there, a lady called, I think it was a lady Carla, to stand, because this way, if Labour traditional Labour voters, who are they going to vote for? Well, clearly they're not going to vote national. Number one, they may actually vote for Casey Costello from New Zealand First, or they may go for one of the minor parties. So it's going to be a fascinating by-election from my perspective. And I think as a country, we're going to learn a lot with this.
Just a closing comment from me. The reason why I said that is because I'm basing it off history, and traditionally they swing to the other way. So that's why I asked that question.
Sure.
So I'll start by thanking both of you for coming on the program. I'll get you to stay there so we can wrap up off the year. But to the viewers, I will say thank you for watching this video. You can subscribe on YouTube, or you can find me on all your favorite audio platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, etc., etc. And I will see you on the next one.